All right. Distinguished visitors and friends, welcome to Marine Corps Air Station New River for the 2019 Jacksonville-Onslow Chamber of Commerce State of the Community Breakfast. We're honored to be your host again this year. Before we begin, I'd like to personally thank Janet Bowen, who does such a fantastic job of putting this on every year, and recognize Ms. Diana Hanson and the staff of the landing for the hospitality they provide every year. I think the attendance at this event each year and the longevity of it is indicative of the State of the Community Breakfast value to the Eastern North Carolina community in maintaining open communications and fostering relationships. While the faces on the panel you see before you today may change over time, venues such as this ensure that the relationship between all the community stakeholders remains strong. The moderated panel you'll see today is similar to last year's format and promises to generate open dialogue. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to open this Chamber of Commerce breakfast and to introduce to you the chair of the Chamber Board of Directors, Ms. Tiffany Choice.
Good morning. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning with praise and thanksgiving for the wonderful opportunity to serve in this great community, dear Lord. Lord, we come before you, and we thank you for the leadership in this room and the wisdom and discernment that you give them to continue leading this community well. We ask, Lord, that you bless the service members and their families who sacrifice for our freedom each and every day. We ask, Lord, that you bless the health and safety of the citizens impacted by the polar vortex. And Lord, we ask that you bless this food that has been so dutifully prepared for us and that it may be nourishment to our bodies. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. On behalf of the Chamber's Board of Directors and Governmental Affairs Committee, I want to thank you for joining us for our 24th State of the Community Address. This event would not be possible without the support of a longtime sponsor, Jones-Onslow Electric Membership Corporation. I also want to acknowledge the hard work of our lead staff person for this event, Janet Bowen, our Finance Director and Governmental Affairs Manager, and staff members Sabrina Thomas, Lisa Murabito, Caitlin Diaz, and Trissa Purcell for their assistance. Several of our elected officials are with us this morning, and I want to recognize them and thank them for their hard work and service to our community. North Carolina House Representative George Cleveland, Vice Chairman Royce Bennett of the Onslow County Commission, County Commissioners Tim Foster, Mark Price, and William Shanahan, Onslow County Sheriff Hans Miller, Jacksonville Mayor Sammy Phillips, Mayor Pro Tem Mike Lazzara, Council Members Bob Warden, Brian Jackson, and Randy Thomas. From the Onslow County School Board Chair, Pam Thomas, School Board Members Jeff Hudson, Bill Lanier, Ken Reddick, Eric Taylor, Paul Wiggins, and Bob Williams. And lastly, thank you to the Marine Corps Air Station New River for hosting the event, and to the Officer Club staff for the wonderful breakfast and much-needed coffee. And now, for remarks from our sponsor, I'd like to introduce the former chairman of the Jacksonville-Onslow Chamber of Commerce and the Chief Executive Officer of Jones-Onslow Electric Membership Corporation, Mr. Jeffrey Clark.
Good morning. It's good to be with you guys again. I missed this event last year. I see they've changed the format. Sammy, did that have anything to do with you? Yeah, I am really glad to be back here. It's a long story about why I missed last year, something to do with illegal betting on the Super Bowl, and I'm on probation now, and I had to meet with my officer. I couldn't be here last year, but the ankle monitor's coming off in a couple of weeks, so everything's good. Yeah, I should be able to get out and about after sundown for a while, in a couple of weeks. So I just want to say thank you to this group for allowing us to be a participant in sponsoring this event. This is a very important event. We learn a lot about what goes on in our community on a regular basis, but we also get a lot of valuable information at this event. So I want to say thank you to everyone that is involved in sponsoring this event. That would be the Chamber. Thank you to the air station for hosting it out here, and there are other sponsors involved with this event, and we all patronize them throughout the year and continue to do that. Also, thank you to the panel for taking their time. This takes a lot of time to prepare for something like this, and thank you all for attending today, taking time out of your schedules as well. But most importantly, these events, as has been mentioned, would not go off without the help that we get from the chamber staff and the air station staff. So let's give them a big round of applause, please. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn this one over to Lorette Legan.
Good morning, everyone. At this time, I'd like to ask our panelists and moderator to make their way to the seats. And also, before I introduce our moderator, Robin Knapp, do not get miffed at Tiffany. I wrote her speech, and I'm the one that left your name out. But we do have Commissioner Robin Knapp with us this morning. Our moderator for this year's breakfast is Dave Jordan, co-anchor of the WITN Evening News. He has been covering news in Eastern Carolina since 1997. David's work and dedication has been recognized with various awards, including from the North Carolina Associated Press and the Radio, Television, Digital News Association of the Carolinas. Dave not only dedicates time to his career, but to his community. He has volunteered with local Crime Stoppers, Beaufort County Alzheimer's, Beaufort County Special Olympics. He's a literacy volunteer. He also does work for the United Way, the Rotary Club, the Red Cross, the Children's Miracle Network, and this morning he's donating his time as moderator for the Chamber. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dave Jordan.
Thank you, Loretta. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure being here with all of you this morning. It's a great crowd and a great day as well. I do have to admit I'm not really a morning person, mainly because I work and do the 11 o'clock news. So I get home late, usually after midnight. And by the time I get to bed, take care of my dogs, it's well after that. Thankfully, last night I was off the 11, so I'm as wide awake as I can be right now. I always like to look at the positives, though, in life and try to find something positive every day. So I don't normally get to see the sunrise, and I did this morning on my drive down, and it was spectacular. I don't know if you guys were up early enough to see it, but there was a beam of sunlight going straight up and down, and it was really remarkable to see that. And I just thought to myself, that maybe is an indication of the day we're going to have today. We've had some bad weather recently. It's been cold. Not quite as cold as some other places. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, so I know what cold is. And just to give you an idea, my parents still live there. And if I think back a couple years when I was there for Christmas, my dad is 83, walks every day. Doesn't matter what the weather is. He's going out and walking and getting his exercise in, maybe a couple times a day. So it was barely 0 this day that I was there. And he said, "Are you ready to go walking?" And I thought, I am not going out in that weather. But I thought, if you're going out, I'm going out. Bundled up, the hat, the gloves, the scarf, jacket, boots, all of it, because there's snow on the ground also. You know, you're out there, you're walking, your breath, you're seeing it all. You slowly start to feel your skin just kind of get tight. One block, I thought, okay, we're good. He said, "Are you just ready to keep going?" I said, "I guess I am." So we continued a little bit longer, got back home, thawed out a little bit. Now, I tell you that because when I talked to him yesterday, I said, "Did you go for your walk?" He said, "It is too cold out there. It's 17 below 0. So I thought, finally, that's what it takes for him not to be able to walk. But you know, that is another aspect of Eastern Carolina sometimes I think we don't realize. We, of course, deal with hurricanes, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But our climate overall is one of the great aspects, too, because, you know, we've been dealing with cold weather, but here we are, you know, today, maybe we don't even need a jacket. So we have that going for us as well. Also, before I start with the panelists, I do want to just real briefly say thank you to all branches of our military this morning. In particular to the Marine Corps that hosting us here today. Your sacrifices do not go unnoticed, and so I want to just mention that as well. So with that, we're going to get started, and as I mentioned, the first question this morning is going to deal with the hurricane that we all dealt with. Florence, in particular, proved the resiliency of our community here. It left many citizens with substantial damage that they continue to deal with, many still displaced. I don't need to tell you, but I'll just give you a couple brief things that the city rainfall indicated about 33 inches of rain. Here on the base, there was wind gusts of 81 miles per hour. So as we know, we're continuing to deal with that. So we're going to start our first question with Brigadier General Watson and just talk about the impacts that you had here and on the military bases and how you guys had to deal with that and respond.
I'm the newest member of the panel, so I may have a few kinks to work out here. But distinguished guests and friends and neighbors, it really is an honor to be with you here this morning. And I know I set the tone here. We're limited to about 3 minutes apiece, so I'll try hard not to blow right through that and be short. And look forward to taking questions later on. I know there were a number of traumatic events, both weather and otherwise, in 2018. But Hurricane Florence, you know, as Dave alluded to, was clearly the defining event of 2018 for our community, both military and civilian. And for us, on the military installations here, there were about 800 buildings that were damaged or in some way compromised by the weather during Hurricane Florence. Most of those incapable of being occupied afterwards. We had about 3,000 personnel displaced. And on top of that, over 4,000 base homes, on-base homes that were damaged and in the process of being either rebuilt or repaired across our Eastern North Carolina Marine Corps installations. Onslow Beach was severely degraded due to the erosion caused by the storm. A couple of the railroad trestles were destroyed, which has made the railroad unable to handle the traffic that we need in order to deploy forces from here. And that's significant. You know, as a location which hosts one of only 3 Marine Expeditionary Forces in our Marine Corps, Camp Lejeune, New River, and Cherry Point collectively, for our nation, are critical power projection platforms. They support our nation's premier expeditionary force in readiness, and we just can't afford to be inoperable or unable to accomplish our mission as America's 911 force. And the storm has been a bit of a gut punch. You know, and as this audience particularly knows too well, the storm impacts were on both sides of the fence line. And quite frankly, you know, 70% of our Marines and sailors and family members live in the community. They live outside the fence line, and they are as much a part of the community here in Eastern North Carolina as anyone else. And that strong and enduring relationship that we have formed over many years together in good times and bad is what enabled the kind of close coordination, the partnership, and the mutual support that helped us to get through the storm and will help us recover in the aftermath of the storm. That critical partnership, working together, those inside and outside the fence line, it saved property and it saved lives during Hurricane Florence. And that teamwork will be particularly critical during the long road to recovery that we have ahead of us. And I'll wrap up with just a couple of accomplishments in the immediate aftermath of the storm with the support of you all in the local community. Although it was challenging and we were not as efficient as we normally are, we were still able to deploy the forces that America counts on overseas. In the immediate aftermath, we deployed the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, which is currently over there serving in the Middle East and in the U.S. Central Command Persian Gulf area of operations. We deployed thousands of members from 2MEF to Norway to participate in NATO's largest exercise in over 20 years, signaling to Russia our commitment and our resolve to our NATO partners. And we successfully deployed the 2nd and the 3rd task forces to Afghanistan, deploying one, redeploying another, again, in the immediate aftermath of the storm. So we continue to be mission capable, but we're going to need the help of everybody here in partnership with your local military to get through the trying times we have ahead. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for that. We're going to continue with Colonel Burton, and maybe you can expand a little bit on that. I think that's one of the aspects maybe sometimes that gets lost is not only did you guys have to deal with the hurricane, trying to deal with the damage, but also continue on with the role of deploying forces and carrying on with that mission.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. As the general talked about, Hurricane Florence has really dominated everything of 2018. As I was thinking about what to write down, I was struggling to come up with anything that happened prior to September, just simply because it is taken up so much of our effort since then. In the lead up to the storm, I think it's noteworthy, if we remember correctly, it was forecast to come ashore as a Category 4. So it didn't turn out to be that way as far as the winds and that sort of thing, and I think we're very fortunate in that regard. But this was the first time, at least in the institutional memory aboard the air station, that we actually had to evacuate some of our housing areas. So when you depart the base today, the housing area on the right, just after you come out of the O Club here, we did an ordered evacuation of that area because we were concerned about the flooding. We didn't get the flooding that we thought we'd get there, but again, it was coming ashore as a 4. But one thing I will say was a positive out of that is we got some GIS professionals on here, the geospatial folks, that the products that they gave us were so good that you could literally walk around with a GPS afterwards where the water actually got to, and it's where they said it would go for a Category 2 storm. So I think that's pretty good. The other thing I would say about the storm is that I'm incredibly proud of the personnel aboard the air station and the flexibility and the adaptability they've had during the storm. We've done a lot of exercises with the EMS personnel out in town here, and I think those relationships and those nodes that we have developed over a lot of time spent, across a table doing tabletop exercises and field exercises with the folks in this room really paid off because we were able to adjust on the fly, get fuel to some critical nodes for generators, for wastewater pumps, for freshwater supply pumps and that sort of thing. And we were ready to open the airfield within 24 hours after the rain ending here. And I think that's a tribute to the work that those men and women put in, along with the efforts that your folks have as well. We did not, one of the things that I was very interested in was how we tied in with the EMS out in town and the command and control of that. And we did not necessarily interface with the EMS personnel out in town to the degree that I thought we might. But we monitored those networks. They were all working, and we had great situational awareness as that goes down. Not related to the hurricane, I try to think about those things in 2018 that the air station's done. We've added some additional capability we haven't had in the past. There's some a new firefighting capability here for the aircraft rescue and firefighters. The P-19R has arrived here, and we are fielding that. The operational support aircraft, we have an upgraded UC-12 Whiskey, which adds a lot of capability to our mission profiles. And we got some much-needed repaving for our primary calm wind runway out here to help alleviate during the rainy season. And then finally, the headquarters and headquarters squadron has been notified that they are the recipient of the Joint Operational Support Aircraft Command Squadron of the Year for the 11th consecutive year. And thank you. And in a newly created category, they placed second overall across all of DOD, so very proud of that.
All right, Colonel, thank you very much. We're going to transition from our military bases now to the city, and the Mayor, Sammy Phillips, talking about some of the impacts, again, that you guys saw, some things that have been done, and where we go from here.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. We have a real good turnout today. Appreciate your time out of your busy schedules coming to hear what we have to say. One of the things, as far as 2018 is concerned, it started out with a bang. Right after the first of the year, we experienced a large snowfall, which just brought everything to a screeching halt, and this was just kind of a portent of things to come. And by September, we experienced what I consider to be the worst storm I've ever witnessed here in Jacksonville and Onslow County. One thing about Florence, what it did do was, though, it did show us the resiliency that our community has, our ability to bounce back. It took a while because we took a really bad hit from that storm, but we have bounced back and we're coming back stronger than ever. In the light of the information that was given out through the media as far as the approaching storm, everybody was expecting the worst. Well, we got not quite the worst of what could have happened when it was designated a Category 4 storm, but we did get a lot more than what we had bargained for, because the storm just sat over us for 2-3 days and continued to pound. Our river out here rose 7.3 feet, which don't sound like much, but when you go over the banks with that much water, it is a lot. Gladly, most people heeded, the warning that the storm was coming and, decided to move inland or other places that may not be impacted by the storm. And by Wednesday, before the approaching storm, you could go down Western Boulevard or 24, and you could tell how light the traffic was at that time, and most people did leave. I'll give you an example of the impact. On any given day, the city pumps about 6 million gallons of water. We pumped 3 million during the storm. So that just gives you an idea that there wasn't a whole lot of people left here. We had the rains that came Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Didn't think they'd ever quit, and finally the sun did come out, which was encouraging. During the storm, we had our Fire and Emergency Services Department had to rescue over 80 people from the hotel out there, Triangle Motor Inn, out on 17 when the roof caved in on the building. And also we had to do water rescues starting on Saturday, where people would drive into these deep water areas and couldn't get out. As Dave mentioned before, we had 33 inches of rainfall, which that's a lot of rain, folks. When you only get about 60 inches of rain per year, 33 inches is a lot of rain. So as far as the impact, though, we experienced about $100 million worth of damage in the city, both residential and commercial, and this was the estimate in days that followed the storm. But as time went by, we found that we had a lot more damage than we at first estimated. Almost every one of our city buildings were damaged to some extent, with Jack Amyette Recreation Center being the worst hit, which is over $1 million worth of damage. Our Riverwalk Marina was flooded, and the train depot downtown was also damaged. We did learn one thing, or several things, not one thing. We learned several things as a result of what had happened in September, and that was how important it is to have collaboration, intergovernmental collaboration between all our people here, as far as the county, ONWASA, the military. It's good to get together and at least have some idea of what you're going to do should this event occur. We found that the communication with our citizens was very vital during this whole ordeal. We set up our command center, emergency operations center at the Public Safety Building. It was manned by city employees, and we actually had a phone bank established. But one thing is we tried to fill in the blanks for the media. The media didn't or was unable to, and that is to stay in touch through Facebook, through our citizen phone bank, and it was very critical. And it turned out that this was a very important thing we did during this whole time was to keep our citizens informed. And there was a lot of concerns. There was a lot of calls through that citizen phone bank. Also, one of the things, and we've been complimented as a city on, is the fact that we got rid of a lot of the debris that was out there as a result of the storm in a very fast, rapid measure. We had our contract in place before the storm ever hit. So it made it a little easier to get folks here, get them deployed to start picking debris up right after the storm. We picked up over 400,000 cubic yards of yard debris, vegetation debris, tree limbs and leaves and all that sort of thing. But there's also a lot of construction debris too. But when you talk about 400,000 cubic yards of material, you're talking about a lot of material. But anyway, what we're going to work on in the future is we're going to look at our staff and if we ask our staff, which we did, we had a lot of our staff people manning those phones and working in the Emergency Operations Center. We're going to make sure that we make sure that their families are taken care of also. This can, during this storm, we had several city employees who were displaced from their homes as a result of it. And a lot of those were actually out working in the storm during the time that it was going on. We want to work on an evacuation protocol, try to get some work together on that. As I mentioned, we want to try to coordinate our efforts a little bit better. And also, as far as the buildings are concerned, we want to look at, in the future, buildings that we do put up, as far as the city is concerned, that we look at maybe a higher standard as far as being able to handle the type of storm that we saw here with Florence.
All right, Mayor, thank you very much. A lot to digest, even with the amount of debris picked up. It is incredible. We know, too, unfortunately, that storms doesn't matter. Emergencies don't ever take a break. And so that's something that healthcare providers have to deal with, as well as dealing with storms. So we want to hear from Dr. Penny Burlingame-Deal about how the hospital was dealing with the storm and also dealing with patients through something like this.
Sure. Welcome. Thank you. I'm grateful to be back here again this year. I do want to echo what Colonel Burton and Mayor Sammy said, which is it was unusual. It was an unusual storm that we've experienced here, given the past. But I'll tell you that coming out of the gate thinking it was going to be a Category 4 or even 5 perhaps, and then seeing that it actually made landfall, I think, at a 2, and then ultimately sat there as a 1. For an unending amount of time. I saw a sign on one of the local businesses as I was driving into work not too soon after it, and it said, so this is what it feels like to get run over by a turtle. Yes. I also would like to say that I tried to talk David Heatherly out of playing Jumanji right before the storm hit. I'm just saying. They can separate us, Dave, but... All right, so we actually began storm preparations the week prior to by making sure that we had an emergency backup generator in place because, again, it was predicted to be a Category 4 or 5, and of course there's tremendous concern around that, not having experienced it before. To your point, the patients, what do we do with the patients, and what do we do to make sure that they are in the safest, treated in the safest possible manner? So the Monday and Tuesday prior to the storm actually hitting, we made a conscious effort to decompress the hospital and evacuate 22 patients who, they were primarily ICU, NICU, dialysis patients, and then medically unstable patients who we felt ran the possibility of their condition perhaps could deteriorate at a point in time after the storm hit, when we would be incapable of moving them to a tertiary center. That's a terrible situation. So we got 22 of those patients to safer ground, for a better way to put that. Facility damages when the storm did hit included about approximately $1.5 to $2 million facility damages for necessary repairs. When you factor in business interruption and staffing expenses, it's another $2.5 million. That's just in the month of September. So we have applied for FEMA, but we haven't received the funding yet. The biggest hit was taken to Onslow Memorial Hospital's education building that suffered catastrophic water infiltration due to failure of the roofing systems. The water just, membrane lifted up, water got under the membrane, and it started raining inside. As a result of that, there were a couple areas that were a total loss. And in the education building alone, that included 2 classrooms, a common reception area, a library, the boardroom, 3 physician on-call rooms, 2 public restrooms, and employee health. So that building right now, as we speak, is completely gutted. It also damaged the electrical, mechanical HVAC, and fire rating system, completely destroyed. So again, that's gutted as we speak. We did try to do as much water remediation to make sure there was no mold or anything like that to hold over until we get the funding from FEMA. The repairs to that building will take about 12 months once we get the funding. Our ambulatory surgery center also suffered some damage as a result of pressure changes that occurred during the storm. The ceiling structure and tiles actually collapsed in on themselves. For that, because there are 3 ORs in use, we actually addressed that immediately. So in 10 days, 2 weeks, that was back up and running. We were back in operation. In addition, there was some roofing issues over information technology, which is a terrible place to have leaks. Well, any of the places that I'm describing right now are terrible places, but cardiac rehab and the cardiac cath lab. You might remember last year I talked about the cardiac cath lab and how it was a new service. So yes, that had a terrible leak, but the equipment was not damaged. Yay. Additionally, there was another physician on-call room that was completely taken out of commission. That totals 4 physician on-call rooms gone. External to the building, the fence around the fuel farm was damaged. Several outlying buildings had water damage, but were put back in operation fairly quickly. So again, we're waiting on FEMA funding. Not sure when that will happen, but we've checked all the boxes that we're supposed to check. Thank you, Danny, for that. One final thing noteworthy is that 51 of our staff and employees were either displaced from their homes or suffered severe damage, and many of them continue to be displaced.
All right, thank you very much. I want to go over there. We appreciate it. We want to talk to the county manager now as well, David Cotton, about all of this, and you're talking about intergovernmental collaborations as well when it comes to trying to deal with a hurricane.
Thank you. Hurricane Florence really tested us as a community, and as Mayor Phillips stated, that end result demonstrated our resilience and our coming together, not just as Onslow County, as a community, as Eastern North Carolina, and then greater as a state, and then nationally. We really could not have achieved the point where we are right now without our federal partners, FEMA coming in. Unfortunately, we did set many firsts and many records that I cared not ever talk about. One is our Emergency Operations Center was continuously in operation for 11 days. Didn't care to set that record. 48 hours out from the storm, we were looking at a Category 4 right up the middle of the New River, essentially splitting Onslow County right down the middle. So another first was a mandatory evacuation. We had planned for it. We had worked tabletop exercises, but actually executing and effecting that, we had never done. And I will tell you that working with our partner with the school system, transporting 2,000 folks inland to shelter in the Raleigh area and then further into Winston-Salem, we could not have accomplished that without the school system. So, yeah, that deserves a round of applause, the school system. And then the amazing mindset that I got to witness firsthand working in the EOC with county staff and with our community partners. I briefly mentioned there is no issue, there is no problem that we're going to face, that there is not a solution. And they took that and ran with it. And I threw some curveballs at these folks over these 10 days. I'll give a real brief example. We were running short on supplies. Nothing was open, no electricity. One of my folks knew someone who worked at a store, thought they could get in touch with the manager. So we had the National Guard execute a mission. They go out, go through high water, find a boat, get the manager of the store, ferry him across in a boat to his store to open it up so that we could get supplies to take to the shelter and those in need. So when I say no problem or issue was thrown at these folks that they could not solve, I truly mean that. To some hard facts, $500 million in losses. This was such a catastrophic storm, even though it was a Category 2. How we look at and actually measure storms because of this storm is changing. Overall, again, it was a Category 2, but if you look at North Thompson Beach, the storm surge was at a Category 4. The winds were a Category 2. The rainfall measured at 500, 1,000 year events, so that puts it up in the Category 4 or 5. So how we actually measure storms, they're taking a look at. Some of the outcomes. So we always have lessons learned, and the county is taking the lead, going through a community hot wash, where we're bringing everyone together. We're looking at lessons learned, what we did well, where we can improve. And from that, we've actually broken out, and we're actively at the point where we're doing function-specific. And all I mean by that is we're getting the subject matter experts together on transportation, sheltering, decision-making, communications, and looking at this storm in particular, and making recommendations so how we can become more resilient and more effective facing the next storm, because it's not an if, it's just a when. And Matthew and Florence demonstrate that. Both of these were in that 100 to 500 year event, and they're but separated by a couple of years. And I'll stop there. I think I'm pushing
Okay.
3 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. I think we all agree that hopefully we don't break those records again.
Yes.
That would be nice. Let's talk about the schools, though. If you had a chance to see the schools, if you watched the news, read the newspaper, saw any of the pictures, the video, it's just been incredible what the schools have had to deal with, and the number of days they were out, and then merely getting back to school, but the task that still is ahead of them is enormous. So we want to hear from Dr. Ron Singletary, the interim superintendent, on all of that.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm new to the hurricane process. Having been through several of these, and even as a young student here during Hurricane Hazel back in the 50s. So I have a long, yeah, I'm older than this guy. I came on board, though. I have learned another lesson. You need an enhanced caller ID, because you never know when you're going to get a call. And when I got the call to ask me to step back into this role, I was holding a brand-new granddaughter. And I looked at the number, and I thought, I'm not sure I know this person. Then I answered the phone, and it was Chairman Thomas saying, would you consider? And I said, well, let me think about that. And I called her back, and then here we have the storm. I thought, boy, can I renege on that call and go back? So my experience has been really post-storm with this, but I have to say to the staff and the team that had to work on this, they have done a tremendous job and have brought us out of a very dark time to a very bright time. But we did have, in your school district, tremendous impact. We have over 36 sites that serve over 27,000 kids, so we're across the county. We have over 3 million square feet of roofing. The new color in Onslow is blue. You can't go in a community or down a street that you don't see blue. And we have a lot of blue. And we're working on that. The first snapshot when this thing passed and the sun came back out, we started getting calls from insurance folks wanting to know, well, what's your damage? What's your damage? And at that time, a quick point, it looked like up to $125 million, up to. now that we are back in, got further eyes on it, we think we're somewhere between $40 and $50 million worth of damage in terms of facilities. Damage on every campus, some more impacted than others. We still have parts of campuses that are not being used, either for instruction. We have a cafeteria that is still maybe a month or so away from coming back. We had 38 days of school, and those of you who are sitting here with children in school, you know that. That is unprecedented. Even with all the other storms we dealt with, we never had quite that much consideration. But the good news is, instruction is back, school is open, business is booming, things are going well, even with the damage that we're working around. White Oak High School was one of our most impacted. We still have 10 classrooms down there. Dixon Elementary, I mentioned, is still without a cafeteria. Northwoods Park has a major wing down, and the gym is down there. But we have several of our gyms that are down, but through a family of working together, we are sharing those. We have home and home games, sharing those. We've learned that you can wear a different color and go in that gym and be okay. So it has gone very well. It's a rolling process, though. As we continue to work with architects and engineers that are evaluating facilities, we're still discovering hidden damage. And we anticipate that that could go on as we continue to work through the process. But one of the things I've told the staff that I've learned through this is, it's what I call my NOAA principle. There are no prizes for predicting the rain, but there are rewards for building that boat. So our folks are building the boat, and I have to say to you that your system maintenance staff has made it possible for us to get back into places. They're working around the clock on weekends. They work 24/7 to see that these facilities that we could handle within our supplies and skill sets, we made it work. And so after 38 days, we're back, and we hope we don't have to do that again. But there were some unintended consequences, things like, I just want to mention this one. Prior to Florence, we had 62 students that we classified as homeless. 62 across 27,000. Since Florence, we've added 1,146 students to that. Now, that's students, but that's families and connections there. And in January, as of January 17, we had 1,208 students that still were in some form of being classified as homeless. That impacts your classrooms, it impacts teachers, it impacts communities across the county. Last year, we only had 317 for the whole year. And in January, we were up to 1,200. So it's a big thing, it's a moving thing. But as the mayor said, we're resilient. School is going on, it's going well, and we will get through this with the help of our commissioners and with our Board of Education working together. We're going to come back stronger than ever. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we'll finish up talking about the hurricane with David Heatherly, the president of Coastal Carolina Community College, the impacts you saw, what this meant for students, and where you guys are now.
Thank you, Dave. For the record, President Ligon, I did not want to be separated from Penny Burlingame Deal, and I certainly did not want to sit with Ron Singletary. But Chair Thomas tells me that he won't be around very long. Without a doubt, this was an eventful year. And before I get into the hurricane, I would be remiss, I think, if I did not mention the over 650 faculty and staff at Coastal Carolina Community College who, throughout, have remained committed to educational quality and student success. As I discussed last year, since 2001, performance measures have been in place to determine the success of students and, in fact, how they perform on an annual basis. And at that time, I reported to you that for all of those years, since its inception, your community college and their students have performed either at the top or near the top every single year, and that is still the case this year. So I must commend not only the students, but the faculty and staff for an exceptional job well done, even through all of the challenges that we have faced. Also, I reported to you that we are, in fact, an accredited institution, thank God. And we, for a second time, and this is very rare for this to happen once, but we are accredited or considered for reaffirmation every 10 years. And my predecessor, Dr. Ron Lingle, who is in the room today, and he's sitting about as far from this table as he possibly can, which there may be a message in that. But for the second time, and it was made official in New Orleans this past December, that your community college, upon evaluation, has had no recommendations for improvement, and that is that's pretty big, folks. So, Hurricane Florence. I too have been in this area a long, long time, not nearly as long as Methuselah over here, but I was here for Fran and Bertha. Never saw all the evacuations that we saw. Never have I seen such devastation. I can tell you that the faculty reported after the storm that we had 880 seats vacated because of that storm. Now that's duplicated. That might mean one student has 4 or 5 seats, but that has had a major impact on our students. And I can tell you, we are very fortunate. We have made every effort we can, and we're still continuing to reach out to those folks to try to help them get back not only into their classes, but in some cases just back to some sense of normalcy. And I will tell you that without our General Assembly in North Carolina, we most certainly would not have been able to make the impact that we have made or been able to facilitate for those people. We are most fortunate to have Senator Harry Brown, Representatives George Cleveland, who as a matter of fact is in the room today, Phil Shepard, and Bob Mueller at the time, all voted for relief funds for the entire state or those entities who were affected by the hurricane, including community colleges. Representative Cleveland, I think $18.5 million was dedicated solely for community colleges, $5 million for structural issues, $5 million for student aid, and then $8.5 million to take into account the lost tuition receipts that would result from the storm. So I must commend you, sir, and your colleagues on that help for those students. Thank you so much. And I have been told that Phil Shepard is also in the room. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Of the portion, fortunately, at Coastal, there was not that much structural damage, although flooding was definitely the case. A good many of our buildings were, we could not use them in a timely fashion. We did fare better than many. Our classes, we missed about 10 days of class. I think there was one, our evening classes, I think, might have missed 11 class sessions or class days. But we were most fortunate in that regard. We have been able to rectify most of those situations. Where the challenge lies is to reach out to those students and help them in any way that we can. Of those funds that have been allotted for Coastal by the General Assembly, we have now committed about half of that to our students, but we're still in the process of reaching out to them and trying to help them get back at least by the summer semester if it's all possible. If you drive across this county, folks, you can see it. There are tarps on houses. There are abandoned homes. If you could read the applications from the students on how this storm has impacted their lives, it's really heart-wrenching. And so my request for you, if you are so inclined, you know, the General Assembly has done, and I think will continue to do what they can to help. But we are only as good as what we commit ourselves to be. And so if you are in a position, I think, to help, we would welcome that, and I would encourage you to contact our College Foundation because, again, there are so many students that have been impacted by this and not able to continue with their dream, which is to get to a better place in their life. So if you're able to help with that, that would be appreciated. Now, before I get off this soapbox here, let me just say that there have been major positive accomplishments. I mentioned last year that we were in the process of starting 2 new programs, and we have in fact done that. Our truck driver training program has begun. We are now in the 3rd class, and it is near capacity. Our power line technician program, Mr. Clark, has begun. We started with our 1st class this semester. That program, as a matter of fact, is now under consideration with Camp Lejeune Marine Corps Base in what's called the transitioning program for Marines and sailors who can, in fact, get their training while they're enlisted and planning to disengage with the military and then be employed once they leave. And that application, I think, is on Dr. Barton's desk right now, waiting for consideration. So we are certainly still engaged, we are making progress, and we are doing everything we can to provide this community, this service area, with those educational opportunities for students and citizens to have a better life. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We are going to continue on now. We're wrapped up with our hurricane segment. Some answers may be related to that, though, I'm sure, going forward here. But I think the one thing is that we've all discovered is being prepared is what is the first key. I know that in my line of work, that's one of the things that we try to stress. I also know that one of the things I've discovered is that no 2 hurricanes or storms are ever the same. So it doesn't matter if it's a Hurricane 1 or a Hurricane 4. You have to be prepared for the worst, as everyone up here has said, and hope for the best. So let's move on to our next topic, and we're going to continue with David here because you were saying some of the things that this next topic deals with, which is challenges and opportunities. So you mentioned some of the new opportunities. What do you see as some of the challenges for the community college going forward?
Well, the elephant in the room, obviously, is the hurricane. And to elaborate on that, I did mention the number of seats that were vacated, and if you compare this spring semester's enrollment to last, we have approximately 200 less students on the curriculum side. Those are the credit-seeking students, and approximately 100 less students on the continuing education side. The community colleges are funded based on student activity for the previous year or the average of the 2 previous years, whichever is higher. Now, I can tell you, folks, if in fact there is no consideration from our General Assembly on that issue, it could be very challenging for your community college. One other time that I can recall, and that was during Desert Storm, we had, with all of the deployments, a number of our families and family members that left the area, and it did have an extremely negative impact on certain colleges such as Fayetteville Tech as well as Coastal Carolina Community College. And consideration was given, there was a hold harmless clause by the General Assembly at that time so that the colleges would not be funded at least no less than the previous year. So it is my hope, don't want to put you on the spot there, Representative Cleveland, Representative Shepard, but if that does not happen, it will be very challenging. And the worst case scenario, it could mean elimination of programs, it could mean reduction in force, and I don't think anybody wants to see that. And I don't believe that that will happen. And even if it does, there will still be challenges to recover, because as we have talked about, everyone on this panel has mentioned, this has been really, really challenging for our citizens. So just stay tuned on that, and we'll see how that plays out. Now, I don't want you to think that there are not opportunities. There are. There are a number of positive things that are underway. We are most fortunate, or I feel most fortunate, to be involved with all the people at this table, even the guy next to me here. I really, really and truly am humbled by just the amount of cooperation that continues to exist. And let me give you some examples. Early college, we've mentioned that in the past. We now have an early college high school on our campus that I think began And I mentioned to you that I approached that with cautious optimism, but I can tell you, if you've kept track of that and you look at the performance of that high school, there are, I think, annual measures that come out, and the most recent, I think, Ron, in maybe September, October, when it was announced, the early college received an A+ on their performance measures. So great job to Onslow County. Great job with Principal Strope. This August, we will take yet another class, a freshman who will join the rising sophomores and juniors. The juniors, if they have gone through with those courses which were prescribed, will be completely embedded in the college. And the goal here is that upon graduation, they will have both their high school diploma as well as an associate's degree. So it's a great program, and I do believe it is one of the best programs in the state. The Regional Skills Center, I'm sure that maybe Dr. Singletary will mention that, but we are working closely with Onslow County school officials. And we are, in fact, planning at this point to be involved with a nurse aid program there at Burton Park. So plans are underway for that when, in fact, it is time for that to open. Met last week with Chief Yanero, who I believe is in the room, to talk about what we might be able to do when it comes to doing a better job for fire training in this community. David Cotton and I have talked, and actually I think, County Manager, we are meeting next week to discuss what we might be able to do, for example, with the Georgetown campus at about an 8-acre facility, and the college will be involved in doing what we can to provide. We've already invested in upgrading the burn building there, and I think it is near completion and ready, so we are very involved there with those. Bear Creek remains a priority. That we think that's a 70-acre plot of land, which about 50 of those acres could be developed, and we're hoping one day to have a first responder training campus there. That can happen and can only happen really with the support of our county commissioners, I think, and they have thus far been very supportive on that concept. In 2016, there was a bond referendum, a statewide bond referendum, which did, in fact, provide $6.9 million to the community college, and our plan there is for a new classroom building, which the design is underway now, and we hope to get started with that in the next 2 weeks. The problem is $6.9 million, folks, doesn't really build that much of a building, to be honest. It was about 11 years ago that the Math Science Building, which is right next to Five Guys there on Western Boulevard, that was built, and that was a little over $10 million. And of course, with inflation and the cost of supplies and materials now, not a great deal you can do with 6.9. Our plan is to in fact build a building. It is my belief, and we've been in discussion with our county manager and the Onslow County, that there will be a supplement provided by them and that we can build the facility that we need. It will primarily accommodate our social and behavioral sciences. So we're looking very forward to that. Now, there is, as I have talked about before, a need for expansion in a number of programs. The problem we have is where to put those. And I can tell you that without the cooperation that we have, especially by those people at this table, our students have clinical arrangements on the base at our regional medical center. They have clinical arrangements with Onslow Memorial. Thank you, Dr. Burlingame, deal for that. We work very closely with our base officials. We have offices and classes not only at Camp Lejeune, but also here. We work with the city. We share a training facility at the range. The list just goes on, and I can tell you that our students and this community would not be what it is without the excellent cooperation that exists, especially with those entities which are represented at the table today. So I think there are still a lot of opportunities. Yes, we've had challenges, but if any community can get through it, this is the community, I believe. We are most fortunate. Thank you.
All right. David, thank you very much. Dr. Singletary, the same question. I know some of it might have to do with the hurricane and the recovery, but some other challenges or opportunities you see.
Well, I think one of the challenges that consistently confronts the school district is growth. We're continuing, even with all of the impact of hurricanes and those kinds of things, growth is going to be an ongoing issue, and That's going to create challenges not only to our entity, but to the county, who we rely on for resources and funds to help house that growth. We're anticipating continuing to grow 300-plus kids a year, and over a period of time, that creates the need for additional schools. We're fortunate that we've had a plan in place, cooperation between our board and the commissioners. We have 2 new schools that are coming on in 2 years. We're hopefully about ready to release those for bid considerations. We'll have another school in the Catherine Lake area to give us some relief in Southwest and Richlands. And then we have the second new school will be in the Stump Sound area to give us some relief in an area that is just mushrooming in terms of growth. Dixon Elementary School, when it opened just prior to my first arrival, was around 500 students. We've got over 1,100 kids on that campus now, only serving grades K through 4 because we've moved 5th grade to the new middle school. So we have a unique situation there, but we have a tremendous need for additional facilities as we look at that. One of the other things that will be continuing to challenge us is student mobility within this district. That is an ongoing challenge, and I think to most folks that just drive by a school, they just see a school and they see kids and they see a full parking lot. They don't realize the impact that student mobility has on the day-to-day operation for your teachers. We had, I think early in the year, we had about 3,900 new kids show up for enrollment at a different place within the county. Well, and 4 or 5 months later, we've had 3,400 withdrawals moving within the county. Now, we didn't grow 3,400 kids during that time, but we had mobility. The players keep changing on the teams. Tremendous impact for your teachers. And our instructional department has embraced a whole new concept that they're working on in terms of a instructional platform where they're trying to be sure that the teachers have consistent planning, consistent materials, and a consistent instructional approach, not telling them how to teach or what to teach, but giving them a framework in which they can ensure that as the kids keep changing teams, that the coach has still got the same plan, and that when they go from seat A to seat B, they're not on necessarily unfamiliar territory. So it makes a tremendous impact as we go through that. I think the other challenge is certainly the funding issue as we look at building these new schools. Schools are very large investments, but in a community that's growing, and I think it's a challenge, but it's a blessing. I'd much rather be here growing rather than being here and declining. So we're not a declining community. That growth impacts us throughout the community, and it gives us opportunities to employ people. We have people coming, but one of the big challenges that we have in the school district is finding teachers. We have a teacher turnover of about 400 a year. Now that's pretty significant because the teacher production in North Carolina is not meeting that demand. We can't just go to our teacher institutions and find replacements. We have to shop globally almost in terms of trying to find those replacements. So that's going to continue to be a new thing. And back to the hurricane, this is going to be a rolling, ongoing process. We're not going to be over this by the time this school year is out. We may not be over this through the end of the next school year. So it's going to have a long-lasting impact. We will get over it, we know that, but it's changed some of our strategies, and we're taxed in some ways we haven't been taxed before.
All right, thank you very much. Move on to the County Manager, David Cotton, and one of the things that Dr. Singletary mentioned was growth, and that certainly spills over with the county, and maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Great. Building on what Dr. Singletary has been talking about in terms of growth, it's both an opportunity and a challenge. So we have competing service demands matched up with finite resources. So identifying which infrastructure that we want to focus our investments on is really crucial. That's everything from roads, the school system, solid waste, water, and wastewater. And of course, the county doesn't necessarily have those specific services, but we are looked to as a financing mechanism for those. And as Dr. Singletary mentioned, it's a good position to be in of growth. I have been in other jurisdictions that were either flat or on the decline. So if I had my druthers, I would rather be here in growth. And the reason that is, the secret's out. Onslow County, Eastern North Carolina, specifically Onslow County, is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. It is a very welcoming community. One of the things, just tying in really quickly with Hurricane Florence, one of the things that Hurricane Florence did exacerbate was our housing market. Right now, before Florence, the supply and the demands were not synced, but they were much closer. Now, the demand is far outpacing the supply. So if you're selling a home or you're in the rental market, it's a great time to invest and be here. But if you're looking to move to the community, your availability of what's out there is much more limited, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Construction as an industry is usually one of the community's largest employers as an industry. So our construction folks are really seeing an influx, and of course, if anyone does have one of those blue roofs, knows that roofing and the skilled labor to have come in here, you're on a long waiting list, unfortunately. One other thing that I do want to touch on in terms of a challenge, and I commend this community for taking it on, because it's one that there is no simple answer to. It's a messy topic, but it's the opioid epidemic, and this community is taking it head on. It's not something that we could ignore and hope that it gets better. So starting with the commissioners, Onslow Memorial Hospital, Trillium, the city of Jacksonville, we started a task force. And from that task force, it grew into regional collaboration. So now we have Craven County, Carteret County, and Carteret regional medical centers. And we will be standing up a mental health and substance abuse crisis center. It's a first step. But on top of that, the county and the city also applied for, and we're only one of 10 counties to receive the Strategic Opioid Assertive Response Grant. And what that does, or what that is a grant that is funded by the University of North Carolina School of Government and Blue Cross of North Carolina as a means to look at what we're facing. Our unique challenge in terms of the opioid epidemic is different from our neighbors in New Hanover County. So being able to identify, study that, and develop a prescriptive, not one size fits all, but a one size that fits Onslow County's unique variables as it relates to the epidemic is the end goal of this team getting together. There's also our community paramedic program. The original focus of it was to divert folks who use the emergency room as their primary care or are frequently using that as their sole source of getting their health care. It's a means of diverting, getting them in touch or in contact with the correct services. And through that, it's actually evolved where they're identifying folks who are in crisis and getting them the help that they need. And just one last piece to that is the opioid litigation. That's something that the commissioners saw the value in participating. It's not a class action suit. It is more of a targeted single impact to Onslow County. Again, not a one-size-fits-all. How this is impacting our community and going after who we've identified as contributing to that. That's the distributors and the manufacturers. So with that, I will, trying to watch my 3 minutes.
David, thank you.
Yes, sir.
We'll move on to Dr. Burlingame Deal, and maybe one of the issues you could talk about that seems to be an ongoing issue with healthcare is financial stability.
Good question. It is an ongoing issue, and we've been pretty vocal about it, so that doesn't come as a surprise to all of you. Of course, the Affordable Care Act several years ago really threw a wrench in the works for healthcare systems and hospitals. We're working with it as best we can. We've tried to adjust. Hurricane Florence certainly didn't help the current situation that we're in as a hospital. A lot of the smaller independent community hospitals have actually joined larger healthcare systems to provide a buffer against some of the changes, both regulatory and reimbursement, that were brought about by the Affordable Care Act. So we are no different. Again, the losses due to Hurricane Florence. I'm also going to tell you that last year, so State of the Community last year, I told you that we had 51 million in uncompensated care. Do y'all remember that? I know you do. So this year, 58 million in uncompensated care that the hospital provides back to the community. So you can imagine we are operating with a negative operating margin this year. Now, I heard Dr. Singletary say the new color in Onslow is blue. That takes on different meaning for us. The new color in Onslow is blue, and that is effective January 1. After a lot of work last year, we entered into a partnership with UNC Healthcare. So you can. I should not have to prompt you all. But I do want to thank a lot of folks in this room right now, and I know I'm going to leave people out, so I'll apologize in advance of leaving them out. But Mr. Bright's not here, but Mr. Bright and Mr. Bennett, the county commissioners, Representative Phil Shepard, Senator Brown, there were so many people behind the scenes helping make that happen. It really did take the lion's share of 10 months in 2018 to work through this. I also want to thank our board who was so supportive in being there and making it happen as well. There are some of our board members here as well that I want to thank: Dr. Carol Johnston, Ms. Collins, Mr. Pugh, Ms. Wilchin, and Mr. Bennett. Thank you all for your support and the work that you all did behind the scenes as well. And finally, I do have to thank the senior team. Wave, guys. Thank you. I do have to thank them because without them, as UNC Healthcare made multiple site visits, and they shared their individual expertise and their enthusiasm for making sure that we provide quality health care to our patients and that we're sustained going forward, and that very much impressed UNC Healthcare. So thank you all for doing that. Again, we're excited about the relationship with UNC. I think some of the financial challenges that we've encountered over the past several years, but it just seems to be getting worse because things keep evolving. I think that it's going to be a tremendous asset to Onslow. So we're going to see additional cost savings and enhanced clinical services. They bring with them an expertise that, a tertiary center and an academic medical center brings with them. So some of the primary benefits that we'll see of this agreement will include expansion of locally available hospital and community-based patient care services. That's amazing. Improved patient experience and satisfaction. Recruitment of locally based, highly trained and skilled physicians and providers, and access to research and treatments that UNC has to offer. I think next year at the State of the Community, this presentation will involve all of the benefits that we've fully realized as a result of the partnership with UNC Healthcare. So we've already seen them in just this very brief period of time, just this month. So that's a great boon for the community. I'm excited about it. I think that it will turn around that operating margin over time, and there will be more to follow. And I stick to my 3 minutes.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Mayor, we'll move on to you and talk about, again, challenges, some things that have probably already been mentioned, growth, maybe public safety, the safety of the city, parks and rec, opportunities like that.
Well, the biggest challenge right now for me is being able to squeeze what I want to say into 3 minutes. First off, we do have several challenges that do yield opportunities for us in the coming year. But without our city staff, it would be very hard for us to meet those challenges that we're up against. And I'd like to recognize not only our city staff, but our council members that are here today, if you'd raise your hands, because without them. The top thing that I wanted to bring up today as far as a challenge, and it is a challenge and an opportunity, is what we've got going on in the next couple of years here. And it's going to impact probably everyone in this room, every government in this room, either directly or indirectly. And that is the 2020 census. We want to make sure that our community is adequately counted. All right, so last census, we estimated there was about 22,000 people that were not counted included into the 2010 census due to our deployed military personnel. Since that time, the rules have been changed, and it was a concerted effort by the city of Jacksonville and others to get this rule changed, and thank goodness we were successful. We want to make sure that we do get counted. We want to get behind our complete count committee because they got a big job ahead of them, and that's getting everybody, to be counted, either by education, contact, and that sort of activity. You ask, well, why is it important? Well, the reason why it's important, we want to make sure that our community receives the state and federal funding that's tied to population. And we want to make sure that's an accurate count because, you figure if you did count 22,000 people, but you're still servicing them, you're coming up on the short end as far as, what funding you should be receiving. And this not only applies to the city of Jacksonville, it applies to Onslow County also. We know that one of the big things to me, and I know to you folks out there, a lot of our commercial development is tied to this census, to these numbers, because we know that these private companies that do come in here and locate in Jacksonville and Onslow County, they do market studies and they determine whether or not this is going to be an effective market for them. And it's all about the money. And if there's nobody here to spend the money based on the numbers that they get, they're not going to come here. So it's very important that we get this count done. As far as Dave mentioned the public safety, I want to first say that our public safety department, I think, is one of the best in the state. And it's under superb leadership with Chief Mike Yanero. Mike, where you at? I know you're here. There he is. We have been looked at as being one of the safest places to live. Isn't that great that we are in a safe place to live? But it's not only just efforts of the public safety department. Some of the things that we've done as a city of Jacksonville has, in fact, contributed to this low crime rate. We are now at 120 dilapidated or blighted buildings that have been torn down in Jacksonville and made way for new construction, new opportunities for businesses to come in and locate. Even when you're riding down the road out here on Western Boulevard or on the bypass and, different areas of Jacksonville, and I've had a lot of compliments come our way as a result of how good it looks out there, and it wasn't a DOT that did it, okay? I'll tell you that right now. That's, the city of Jacksonville has put through the effort there to beautify our city. And in my opinion, we've got as beautiful of a town as you can find anywhere. Hasn't always been that way, but it is now. We're continuing to work on commercial uses. Our commercial growth is still there. You go down Western Boulevard now, you're seeing new construction that's is still continuing. So it hasn't slowed down. Dave mentioned the housing market. It has slowed down a little bit, but there may be a resurgence on the horizon for that. Downtown redevelopment is another priority that we have as a city, is to try to get that area going again. I think we've made some very good inroads as far as making that such a more livable, workable place down there, because you got to remember, I was a policeman 40 years ago down there, and it wasn't the same downtown as it is today, by any stretch of the imagination. But thanks to the county commission, Dave, we've located some very nice buildings. We got a great skyline coming into Jacksonville now. If you come across the Phillips Bridge, not named after me, of course, but if you come across the Phillips Bridge, you'll see the skyline of Jacksonville, which, you know, in my opinion, it really looks good with the new courthouse, that great big office building that's really a jail. It's down there. Looks like a big office building to me, but it's really taken on a new face downtown. And I know that as residents or a longtime resident of Jacksonville, I really appreciate the changes that I've seen in Jacksonville. It's really been wonderful to see.
Longtime resident, he was born at Onslow Memorial.
Exactly.
We birthed mayors.
Thank you, Penny. Also, downtown, one of the stumbling blocks we have as far as being able to develop downtown, of course, is parking. Parking still continues to be an issue with the downtown area. We have a lot of things going on down there during the daytime, so if you wanted to go down to, say, one of the little restaurants down there to eat, you may have to really struggle to find a parking place. Well, you know, hopefully we're going to be able to find a solution to that. We just had a joint meeting with the county commissioners this past week on Monday, and at that meeting, we decided that we were going to start looking at and coming up with a plan to improve the parking in downtown Jacksonville. So hopefully we'll be able to add, you know, and the thing about it is, if we ever intend to develop Jacksonville to within our vision, what the vision we want it to be, there's going to have to be some place for somebody to park. But anyway, I just got tapped on the leg by Dr. Burlingame here. She told me to. So, thank you.
I guess that means time's up. Okay. We want to continue with Colonel Burton now. We're talking about challenges and opportunities, and I suppose this is really an interesting area for you guys. I mean, I'm interested to hear the answer, because it's not only the challenges, I guess, that you have here as a local military base, but you're faced with things that are changing around the world and dealing with all of that. So if you could kind of address that.
Yeah, I think I touched on this last year a little bit, what we call station master planning here, and how you make decisions. You know, when you build a building, you buy that building for 60 years. That's the life of the building. How you make decisions now based on projected threats, projected growth of the force, projected capabilities that you have to do, and all that stuff. And it's hard. It's hard to do. I mean, it really is a challenge. And then when you take a look at a base like New River, I say we're bolt-on, you know, because over the years we've just added projects and all that, and we're not functionally arranged so that you know, a Marine can stop turning wrenches on a flight line, walk over to the chow hall, grab some chow, and then get right back to work. He's got to get in his car, he's got to drive, he's got to go park. And when you build parking lots, now I have to manage that stormwater, and all those trickle-down effects that go with that make that incredibly challenging. And you really have to find critical thinkers that are able to be able to maybe step out of a programmatic view to do that sort of thing. It's interesting work and it's fascinating, but That's the stuff I sit around and ponder and look at my whiteboard and try to do every day when we're going with that. Resourcing is always a challenge in any government service organization. You know, when the fiscal environment is uncertain, that only adds a layer of complexity to that you know, compounds the difficulty which you have with that. But within that, there are a lot of opportunities as well. You know, the ability to shape the future of what the Marine Corps is going to look like, how you impact, you know, what your kids may be doing, or your kids' kids, in that fact, may be doing, is incredibly rewarding. So.
All right, thank you, and we'll continue on with that same question with Brigadier General Watson.
Okay, thanks. You know, I mentioned in my first set of remarks about the units that were deployed and redeployed from here in eastern North Carolina in the aftermath of the storm. You know, and I think it's true to sort of paraphrase a quote that's often used. I mean, the sun really does never set on members of the eastern North Carolina military community that are deployed overseas in the service of our nation. I mean, they are from the Western Pacific to the Middle East to Europe, Africa. I mean, they are truly globally deployed all the time. And what allows them to be successful is the fact that we have, you know, we have the facilities, we have the people, we have the resources here to prepare them for what they go to do overseas in the service of our nation. And what allows them to focus while they are overseas is the collective effort we put as a community into taking care of their families while they are gone. So, you know, that partnership is critical. I want to reemphasize the integration that we have inside and outside the fence lines of our installation in the service of our nation. You know, I think, you know, it's really, it's hard for me to talk about challenges and opportunities in the near future, though, without reverting back to Hurricane Florence. And I think a couple of things are important to mention. One is that, you know, while there were innumerable examples of successes in the preparation for the storm and during the storm and after the storm, and in the cooperation we have, like, you know, the new Level 3 Trauma Center at Camp Lejeune's Hospital and the partnership that they have with Onslow Memorial in service of not just our military family members and veterans, but the local community. It's the first trauma center in DOD on a military base that serves not just the military, but the local community. You know, and our partnership between our civilian and military security and safety employees on the bases with our first responders out in the local community, and our leadership with the emergency operations centers and things like that. But not everything was perfect, right? I mean, we did have some lessons learned. We had some friction points. We had some things we need to do better. And there's been a good after-action review process that's been started. And it's really important that we build on that because, you know, we're what? A few months away from the next hurricane season. You know, I know that's kind of scary. So we need to focus on that, and we need to have those adult conversations. You know, we continue to celebrate our successes, but more importantly, you know, as professionals, to talk about how we can even be better prepared for the next one. And then I'll kind of just talk for a second about money. So if you've been watching the news at all, you know, 3.6 billion with a B. You know, that is the cost of Hurricane Florence for Cherry Point, New River, and Camp Lejeune, our eastern North Carolina installations. That's about, you know, that's the cost of operating out of, you know, 60, 75-year-old infrastructure that we've been putting Band-Aids on for years. Those buildings don't hold up so well. I mean, there was very little damage to the buildings that have been built on our installations over the last 10, 15 years. But the older buildings, it was catastrophic. And $3.6 billion is what it's going to take. $2 billion to rebuild the building, to destroy the buildings that are unrecoverable and build new facilities. $1.2 billion to repair the buildings that it is still cost effective to repair. And then about another $300 million for the IT infrastructure, the routers and switches and computers and servers and all that stuff that was destroyed due to water infiltration. And a couple of things work against us, and I'll sort of wrap up with the fact that, you know, the audio and the video, right? You know, as you look at what gets the attention of the nation, you know, I think that's a great example, you know, the being run over by a turtle. I mean, but you know, that's not an attention grabber on the news, right? You know, I mean, you know, people have a short attention span. So, this has got to keep people's attention over time. And our resilience kind of works against us in some ways, because we are. I mean, as military members and as members of this community, I have not, lived here as long as many of you, but I've probably served 10 years out of my career here at Camp Lejeune and in Jacksonville. Lived in the community and on the installations. And the members of this community are resilient. And so, we talk about what happened, but we ultimately kind of put on our big boy pants and get to work, right? And we make it happen. We get ready for the next one. We fix what's broken and move on. We need help here to get well from last year's storms. We need help from our representatives, in the state capitol and in our nation's capital. And they've got plenty of other challenges, to deal with right now in Washington and elsewhere, as we know. So they've got other things that they've got to deal with as well. So we've got to keep this on their radar. We've got to keep this, help people to understand that although, this is not failure for us. I mean, this was a gut punch, and we will move on in order to get well and continue to do what we do collectively as a community. In support of the defense of our nation, we're going to need some financial help. $3.6 billion is not going to be easy, but that's what it's going to take in order to get well. And the video, it works against us, right? We're not Tyndall. The Air Force Base in Florida that was crushed, it was really just flattened during Hurricane Michael. So that plays well on TV. Here, what happens? A few singles blow off, and then you get 3 days worth of 33 inches of rain that seeps in and destroys the buildings from the inside. So you drive by, you put a camera on it, and it's like, a couple blue tarps doesn't look so bad, right? I guess they're okay. But we all know that that's not the case. So we have got to continue forums like this. It's really an honor to be a part of this, but forums like this can't be where it ends. We've got to amplify the conversation to the folks that can actually help us to get well, from the effects of last year's storms. That's a lot of money, but it's also, it's a lot of money coming into the community. And I think that's important for all of us in terms of the future. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. That is going to conclude our question and answer portion of this forum. If anyone would like to do a 60-second closing remark, we'll start at the end, and if you could keep it to 60 seconds, we would all appreciate it.
I'll just say, again, an honor for me to be here, and I really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks.
I'll throw in a plug that in April, Marine Corps Air Station New River will celebrate its 75th anniversary. I think that's a tribute to not only the air station, but this community and us being a part of that. And there'll be new station leadership coming this summer. I'm going to be stepping away as Marines do, and I will make sure that I introduce my successor into this community, and he will continue to serve you well. So thank you.
I'm going to make mine short and sweet this time. I want to thank everybody for coming, and this has been a very enlightening experience here to hear from my different community partners as to, what challenges they've had and how they handled the situation that we dealt with last year. Last thing I'll say is, if you ever have any questions about what we're doing with the city, feel free to call City Hall 938-5200 or go to the city's website at www.jacksonville-nc.gov or visit our Facebook page, and we get a lot of information out there that way. Thank you.
I just would like to close with the collaboration that goes on in this community is so evident in what we talked about here, and I'm completely impressed. Hurricane Florence actually was a good example of how we all came together as a community. The sum of our collaborative efforts are so much more than our individual ones, and it benefits the community overall. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, particularly my bosses for allowing me to represent the county. Do want to drive home the importance of the 2020 census. There is $675 billion up for grabs at the federal level. Of the 435 House of Representative seats, that number does not increase, but the ratio of representative to the represented, so the reapportionment is really crucial. So help us get the word out of the importance of the census and make sure Onslow County has appropriate representation. Thank you.
Just want to leave you with this unfinished business that we have in the school system. Your Board of Education is rapidly coming to the close of a superintendent search. They are on target with that, and hopefully in a few weeks, they will make a selection. This is going to be a big decision for them. It's going to be a big decision for this community and for the school system. But the good news is, what a great school system and a great community to be attracting someone to. And they're going to do a good job for you. Thank you.
I have said many times, we are not a military community, we are the military community. How fortunate we are to be the home of so many military heroes, and especially have a community of civilians that understand their mission and support that mission. I've heard General Watson say and General Burton say in the past, in their experience across the nation, they have never been involved in a community that is more supportive of the military than this one. And we are what we are, folks, and you've heard it all across this panel. We are what we are because of our sharing of resources and our cooperation through understanding, because of the fact that we understand one another. And I think with that, and continuing with that, it can only get better. Thank you, and have a good one.
Thank you all very much. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here as well, and all of the wonderful information that we gained in moving forward with what we heard here today. And thanks to the Chamber for allowing me to be here and be a moderator. It's been my pleasure to be here with all of you this morning.
And I, too, want to thank you for joining us this morning. I want to say thank you again to our signature sponsor, Jones-Onslow Electric Membership Corporation. And I want to say a special shout-out to the former commander of the New River Air Station. Tim Salmon is with us this evening, and his wife and my friend, Annette. Thank you for joining us. 2019 also marks the Chamber's 75th anniversary. So, Colonel Burton, whoever the new guy is, tell him I'm going to be coming to visit. We're going to plan some events together. But we do already have some very exciting and special events planned to celebrate this milestone, and we encourage you to be a part of these events. Go to the Chamber's website. We're going to have all the information there, or pick up our monthly newsletter, and you can find out everything's going on. Thank you again, and we stand adjourned.